Let's give Malik a hand for his advocacy with young people, media, and all. Thank you so much. Okay, thank you. Okay. And kudos to you. Kudos to you for
Thank you.
uplifting the young people in New York as you have begun to do across the country. Tell us for a minute, and this is very informal here, what do you hope to achieve in your film, in the work that you are espousing and you're continuing in New York, and your work as not only a serial entrepreneur, but a community activist, a developer, and more? What do you hope to achieve with young people in New York and across the country in general?
Thank you. So a little more context. So Yoba Development, as Stacy said, I've been doing this community work since I was 16 years old. I'm the beneficiary of people pouring into me. At 20 years old, I was working in 13 high schools around New York to help reduce the dropout rate, working with a group called the City Kids Foundation. And we use art to engage community and young people. So understanding the power of art and creativity to reach people where they are, to move them into spaces that they may not believe they can get into, that's one major objective. So as a company, Yoba Development, our slogan is builder of people, places, and things in that order. And in order for us to get to where we're going to get to, we got to involve young people. That's why you have your HBCU program. And so for us, putting young people at the center of the equation is really, really critical, not just when we do conferences, but we just ran the first real estate development curriculum in the history of New York City for high school students. We have our partnership with Pratt Institute. It's put like those young people you see. I literally, as I was, yeah, you can clap for that, but really for these kids, because, as a result of that, right, we just ran it last spring. We got one young man got an internship, a paid summer internship with Hines Development, and now he's getting, joining the union. He's 19 years old. He's now being employed full-time while he figures out his college path. We got 2 young people, scholarships to Cyber Camp. We got another young man, an internship with True Fund. And that's light work, right? Just literally putting young people in rooms like this where they get to meet people, they get to present, they get to help organize our events. So there's that. But we gotta bring it to the babies. We gotta show them by example that it's possible. These young people in the doc, I didn't know them. The young Latino kid I knew. The young nappy-headed kid, Vaughn, who ends up as the star of this 10-part series, he was a busboy in a restaurant, came up to me, delivered my check, and said, hey man, I met you in Harlem, I took a picture with you a couple years ago, I know you do movies, I'm a rapper, what you got? And I said, well, I'm working on this thing on real estate. He said, oh, I know who Philip Payton is. I was like, how you know Philip Payton? Philip Payton was the first black developer in Harlem in 1904. And I said, he was like, well, I was at Columbia, I was researching Bumpy Johnson, so I learned about Philip Payton. And I said, here's my number. We start shooting July 17th, 2019, we shot this. And he showed up, and we're still in each other's life. That kid, he was on the block, still in Harlem, and he's now living in LA. He got his real estate license. He's also a young real estate entrepreneur, so he was never even thinking about real estate as a pathway. And so that's really the mission, is to make sure that young people know that they have a seat at the table. I was given a seat at the table in 2007. It's a lifelong dream. You saw where I grew up, those opening images. That's what Harlem looked like when I grew up. And I would dream about building buildings. My mother loved architecture. I didn't know it was called development. I just knew, like, why do we have to have empty lots when I go to school downtown and my friends ain't living like this? I tried to do my first development deal when I was 17. I tried to get a BMX track built in Central Park. And I met with the Parks Department, and I had all my facts and figures, and dude indulged me, but he's like, nah, it ain't never gonna happen. But I like you, kid. Like, keep going for it. So I just know that if we put young people at the center of these conversations, we can really excel and accelerate the access to information and opportunity and transform things in ways that we haven't been able to. And if we use media in the way we intentionally use it, then, you know, we can really make a difference. And one last thing, because I do long-winded answers, but what I love about where I am, like you said, what do I hope to gain with the young people? We all young, right? We all younger than we're going to be tomorrow. And so the fact that I'm here is a result of the efficacy of the work, right? We were introduced, is Manda here? Right? So Manda and I met on a phone call, right? Because our mutual friend, Edric Brown, knew what I was up to. He says, I need you to meet my girl. And so in turn, Manda connects me to you. And you were connected with Dina Harris, who I was connected to through a young woman I met at the African American Mayors Conference in DC. And so when we're in community doing this work intentionally, telling these stories, accessing opportunities for education, accessing opportunities for development, amazing things happen. And I was on a set doing a show called God Friended Me, as I said in the doc, in 2018. And that's when God spoke to me and said, real estate, young people, and filmmaking. I didn't know what the manifestation would be. But that man that you saw in the doc, Scott Reckler, I went to him with this idea. Hey, I want to help increase diversity in the real estate business. And he said, I'll fund it. And so when he said that, I said, you know what, I'm going to shoot a doc. And I'm going to use film as a way to engage community. But it's really just a way to amplify the message. And so I'm really happy to be here with you and these lovely folks and continue to do this work and support what you're doing.
Well, we appreciate you, Malik. Let me just ask you a side question. How did you go from acting to real estate?
Well, we all are real estate. In fact, we used to be the real estate.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
And the first real estate we own is in our minds. And real estate is storytelling, as I said. So for me, there's no differentiation. This room, the decor in this hotel, the colors, the lighting, the textures on the wall are all telling a story. Mm-hmm. And so if you contextualize it in the space of storytelling, it's all storytelling. When you're going to get that loan or that mortgage, whatever it is, you're selling your idea, you're raising a fund, you're telling stories. This is the problem. This is what we say is going to be the solution. And you have to have that, not only that financial hook, but that emotional hook. And I mean, we can go down the line on how hard it is if you look like us to get that dough. Because there's a disease that says you can't-ism, you don't deserve-ism. There are people on this planet that don't believe we deserve what God has intended for us in an abundant universe. So we have to tell those stories. Mm-hmm. And so I've always been thinking about these things. This isn't a hobby. This is what I actually do day to day. There was just a writer's strike, an actor's strike, but I'm still working. I'm still working on development deals. I'm still working on raising funds. I'm still working on education programs. So for me, it's never about I went from one thing to the other. It's all part of a continuum. I bought my first property when I was about 26 years old. And when I sold it 8 years later and made almost $1 million on one real estate transaction, I said, you know what, I need to take this really seriously. And so that's really what spurred a lot of it for me. I have to teach other people what I know. And I don't know as much as folks who have been here before me, but I know more than a whole lot of other people. And for all of us, as long as we know more than somebody else, it's important that we teach it.
Excellent. Where do you see yourself in the next 5, 10 years? I mean, doing this kind of work, what kind of end result, what kind of outcomes are you hoping to achieve? Not hoping, that you will
What are
achieve
we working
in 5
toward?
and 10.
So right now, here in the lovely state of Georgia, in Augusta, I'm part of a development team. We have 77 acres by Fort Gordon, which is about to be Fort Eisenhower. We're building 1,000 units of housing. We are going to include some homes as well. I've been talking to my good friend Booker T. Washington, if you know him. He just built South Park cottages here in Atlanta. And so we're looking at some of the tiny home models. On that site, there's going to be a charter school, a Boys and Girls Club. We're looking to put a Marshall station. Augusta Technical College is looking for space to do, they teach film, crew, the technical side of filmmaking. They're looking for space there. There'll be a sports training and education facility. So that's one project that's, at least the next 10 years. But we're still in Baltimore. I just left Baltimore 2 days ago. So we're in the second phase in the Baltimore project. Got stuff in New York. So this is my life's work. I mean, everything I've ever done has led up to this time, right? And I've been in development space for 16 years. So, first as just an investor, and what I'd like to say was like a 15-year apprentice, just really being studious so that I can learn. And then teach what I'm learning. So I'm just going to continue to rock out. I'm still working toward, you said we're reaching millions. I'm still reaching for my billions. Yeah. I've done some millions, but I'm definitely reaching for some billions because at the end of the day, for me, the only reason, like I said at the top of the doc, is to build things that don't exist. Like some of the projects I'm involved in, like in New York, if you're probably familiar with the PAC program where, New York City Public Housing is partnering with private developers to rehab public housing stock. And so I'm involved in some of those projects as well. So, just doing everything that I can, whether there's a writer's strike or not, or like Manda said yesterday, Malik, it's a lot. Like, how are you still going to manage, your acting career? And that's not the most important thing for me right now. Creating things of value are most important. And the best role I've ever played is me.
Got to be. Got to be. And guys, let me just say that we do need another mic because I do want to have any of you to ask Malik a question. I have a few more questions for him, but if we can get another mic, Brandon, that would be great. Malik, how would you describe yourself?
He tired. He busy, he resilient. He's living on purpose, in purpose. I'm really the product of my parents,
And tell us how you got your name. When I first met Malik, I said, I just love your name. Tell us how all of that came about.
So I was born Muslim. My father, the name Yoba, my father made up. He was born Milton Myers in Aliquippa, Pennsylvania. He was a jazz musician who moved to New York when he was 15, born in 1927 in Jim Crow America. And he'd show up for these jobs, and people thought a Jewish dude was showing up with a name like Milton Myers. And he got tired of that, so he took Nature Boy and spelled it backwards, which was Erotan Yob, and then he added the A, and gave meaning to it. And Yoba means last of the slaves, a new generation. Okay. And so he raised us with very specific values around, making sure that we contribute to society, make sure that we contribute to community, that we leave places better than it was when we started or we found them. My mother was very similar. But the thing that's both tattooed on my arm and something I live by, he would always say, build your own generator so when they turn off the power, you still have lights. And so that's the whole serial entrepreneur thing. Yeah. I've had a restaurant, some of you might have been to my restaurant in New York, Soul Cafe. I've had a marketing company. I've had, obviously the real estate. I've been in fashion. I've been in music. I've got this. I'll give some away. So this is a digital, you said, who am I? So we have an activation we do in New York called From the Ground Up Flipping the Hood, which we will take around the country as well. And what it is similar to this, except 30% of the people here will be high school students. And there's no VIP, there's no green room. It's about putting young folk in spaces where they can access opportunity and information, right? It's people from, real estate, federal contracting, technology, anything you can imagine when it comes to the best of who we are from a business perspective with a bit of a pop culture lens. And so this was the program we did, we did it as a newspaper, but this is going to be a digital platform. Back to your question about where do I expect to be over time, so that all this great work that folks are doing, and folks don't necessarily know who you are from a broad pop culture, mass media perspective. Well, how do we get there? Yes. We have to have media. We have to control the narrative. And so that's one of the things that we get to bring to this space in a really, really creative way, both on the digital side and the print media side. So for instance, you know, I mentioned Augusta. Mm-hmm. Already before we've even put a shovel in the ground, there's some folks that have that disease I mentioned that already have started putting press out there to sow seeds of doubt. Mm-hmm. Why? All we want to do is provide housing and opportunity for folk. Why do they feel they need to obstruct this progress? Mm-hmm. Because of what we look like, pure and simple. Pure and simple. And for those that don't really believe that systemic and institutional racism exists, you get deep into this development game, and like I talked to your husband yesterday, yeah. he shared his stories too. You know, when you show up and you have $1 billion of valuation on a project, they'll, oh no you don't. We gonna keep moving this goalpost. Oh, you wanna do low income housing tax credits? We ain't gonna give it to you. But you got your construction loan, so the clock's already ticking, so you're already spending your money. But then you're supposed to be reimbursed for those LIHTC credits that you don't get. But no, you can't get the reimbursement. You got to put that back into the pot. So now you got a deficit. So these are the things that we have to educate each other on. We have to be prepared for. We have to fight against, both economically, spiritually, physically, collectively. So anyway, I don't want to be on my soapbox, but it's real. It's real when you're putting hundreds of millions of dollars into the ground and people are trying to stop you.
And what do you think is the answer? I'm sorry.
Resilience, because at the end of the day, you know, a couple of weeks ago I was in Birmingham, Alabama, and it happened to be the 60th anniversary of the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church. And it was pretty auspicious on that day, and I was screening the doc, and I was doing this chat, and there was a woman in the room who was in her 80s. She was actually exactly 80. And she said, you know, everything that you're saying is what my mother and my grandmother used to tell me. Mm-hmm. So what that said to me is that the game ain't really changed. But those 4 little girls did not die in vain. Mm-hmm. Because even if the message sounds the same as mama and grandma's message from an 80-year-old, we're still further along than we were when those 4 little girls were murdered. Yes. And so I just think that it's about resiliency, and I think it's about creativity. We have to be much more creative. Most folks just have their head down and say, I'm just going to do the work. But we got to tell these stories. We've got to be really creative on how we tell their stories. What this doc series has done for me is opened up so many doors to at least get in spaces that I could not get into 5 years ago in the way that I'm able to. So I just think that we have to remember we are the manifestation of our ancestors' wildest dreams. They are depending on us, and we just have to stay the course, because this is what God intended for us to do. That's what I truly believe.
Well, we just talked just the other day about what is our assignment, and you are continuing to speak to that. Malik, certainly for us as nonprofit leaders, telling our story, being involved in the media in any way, you know, has always sort of come across as something that we're unfamiliar with, it's too expensive, don't know how to do it. You know, number one, why and how? Why is the media and getting the word out so important? And how can folks who don't have a lot, you know, I mean, as we're running many of our organizations, there's just not a lot of extra money around. How do you suggest that, well, first of all, the why, but how do you suggest that we go about expanding our reach and teach in the media?
So I think that's a great question. So first of all, I am here for you. That's why this will exist in a beautiful glossy version, but also as a digital platform to help tell your stories. But social media is free for the most part. And I think at minimum, you know, accessing some of these young people perhaps that you have as part of your HBCU network to team up with some of the nonprofits at minimum to get your social media game tight so that you can begin to tell your story. But for me, obviously, folk know me from media. And in my experience, just being an actor, I've seen the power of what happens. I can't tell you how many people became cops because of New York Undercover. Like, real talk. Like, Rodney Harrison, who just retired as chief of police for NYPD, it was because of New York Undercover that made him want to be a cop. Absolutely. And so not only do we inspire people to want to be actors just by doing what we do, we also inspire people to be the things that they see on screen. And that's why, so speaking of media, I'm going to just self-promote. So on the back of this newspaper, you see The Lords of Brooklyn, which is a scripted show that we've written that's basically at the level of The Wire meets Billions, but in the world of New York City real estate development, because I understand that even from a scripted perspective, if you're just chilling at the house on your streamer, you can be entertained, but you're going to learn about how this built environment comes to be. So I think that we all have a story to tell. A lot of times folk feel like, oh, nobody really wants to know that ain't it. Everybody has jewels and gems that they can mine from their lived experience to begin to share. And I'm sure we've all had that experience where you share the story and somebody goes, oh my God, I can't believe you're telling me that. Me too. Really? Like, there's power in that. And so we just have to be really, really intentional about making sure we tell stories. And I know your husband hates the media, but I told him I'm a work with him to make sure that
we need to work together, no question about it. Guys, we have come to a close. I want to say to Malik, and I have to say this about Malik. When Monda introduced me, and of course I knew his name, and she said, you know, he's in development. Of course, I'm thinking, well, look, you know, this is what we're also doing, and we'd love to meet Malik. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, you know, one thing, when you start dealing with these celebrities, my God, they don't call you back. You know, there's a whole lot of riffraff going back and forth and all of that. Malik is just the opposite. You text that brother, within 5 minutes, you get a response. He is on it. He is humble. He is gentle. He is truly a giant. And we thank you, Malik. We really, really, really thank you for your work, for what you're doing in the community, for what you're doing for our people, and for what you're doing in the real estate development area. You are a gem. Take millions along. This is what we're talking about here, reaching millions. We want to reach millions with the hope, with the promise, with the idea, with the preparation and the education so that they can do what we're doing, so that people can be exposed and ignited with a can-do spirit. Because to your point, Malik, you know, the disease, there is a racial disease, but there's also a I can't do it disease. And we have to overcome that. We see that a lot with our children. We see that a lot in our families. And, you know, people just get so stuck. And my God, this is why I talk to Wells Fargo and many of our other partners a lot about these mortgage denials. Let me tell you, we have to limit these mortgage denials, and we in the audience are the people that can really help with that. If people are better prepared for approval, they won't get denied, because when people are denied, that just pushes them back again. They didn't want me. Go ahead.
You know, you probably saw in the news this morning what happened in Philly, right?
Tell everybody.
So it's been happening all over the country, right? Organized retail theft. You've seen these images. That's directly connected to the real estate. Guaranteed, and this is just anecdotal evidence, those young people that are making those choices, guaranteed, do not come from families that have been able to pass on wealth to them.
That's right. That's right.
So people are looking around like, what do we do? Because trust me, if they were running up in Wells Fargo doing that, they would do something about it.
Yeah.
Retailers are closing all over America because it's apathy. It's saying, that ain't my problem, those aren't my kids, Target's gonna figure it out, Walmart's gonna figure it out. We have to figure it out, and we have to make the investment in community, in the real estate of these minds and in these spirits of these young people, because that is why I said our slogan is builder of people, places, and things in that order. They're stealing things. They're breaking into places because we're not investing in the people. And I just want to thank you and your family, the entire Griffith family, for all the work that you have done, because as you know, no one has asked you to do it, but you answered the call, and thank you for inviting me and sharing your stage with me.
Okay,
Greatly
once
appreciate
again, Malik Yoba, to close.